Hey guys, I'm Doug. I'm sitting here today with Jeff Kauffman, the founder and CEO of Parachute. Um, Parachute is actually a consultancy agency specializing in Web3 strategies, solutions. Is that fair?
That's fair. That's fair. That's where we are at today, and then lots of ambitious plans to go beyond that.
I love that. And I'll be dumbing Jeff way down today so that he can talk to someone like me about specifically NFTs. Really trying to understand the mindset around them, trying to understand what's the differences between saying things like Web3 or cryptocurrency or blockchains, or all the lingo that people like me are just way behind on. So I'm starting with that. We're going to get to Parachute. We're going to talk about some fun stuff. But before that, specifically NFTs, what's the baseline here, man? What do we mean when we say an NFT? What's that all about?
So we'll define it first. NFT stands for non-fungible token. And essentially the easiest way to understand it is property rights, digital property rights. And that's a good explanation for where we are right now. But in the future, it can also represent any form of property rights or ownership. But the primary use case right now is we've never really had property rights on the internet. The internet has just been this open thing. When you stick stuff into it, you don't own it. There's no way to track ownership, right? And blockchain technology, and then specifically NFTs, allow for the first time property rights that move through the internet. And that just changes everything.
So when you say Web3, that makes sense then, right? It's the evolution of the web. So you've started Parachute to get ahead of that. I mean, you're an expert here. I've been reading up. I've been seeing a little bit of the forward-thinking mentality you've had in that space. Tell me what's the vision for Parachute? Where do you want to drive it?
Yeah. So if we kind of go back to Web 1, Web 1 was basically browsers and websites, primarily dominated by search engines. And then Web 2 is mobile and social, and kind of stacks on top of Web 1. And then Web 3 is blockchain and coins, all kinds of crypto coins and whatnot. So we kind of go from on disk, the floppy disk of AOL, to now we're dialing up and we're going online. And then in Web 3, we're going on chain. And that's where the blockchain is. And so Parachute is designed to help brands and marketers and agencies jump into Web 3. And so, it's like I've kind of always been wanting and waiting for the next sort of big moment, the big shift, right? I started my career at the beginning of social and mobile. And of course, when you're starting your career, you don't know jack about anything. So you make all kinds of mistakes and you don't really, but you have fun and you learn, right? And then you get 10, 15 years into your career, you've learned a little bit of stuff, but trying to take that kind of professional experience and then jump into a new technology sort of movement and be at the start of it.
Wow. And I read a little bit about your background. You've got a 15-year branding, big agency background. I mean, I'm guessing you're applying that with everything you're doing now. Are you looking to pick up more agency side clients? Or are you looking for brands to kind of jump in with you, or both, or businesses all over the place?
Yeah, my background is primarily social media, and when I was coming out of college, I focused on social because, at least for me, it was very apparent that social was by and large going to dominate consumer behavior, and that's kind of the area I fit into professionally is consumer behavior, and then advertising would be the main economic engine of the internet, and so that meant focusing on paid media. So heavy focus on paid media, and if there's a through line, it's what's the economic driver of the internet, and then try to be at the center of that. And so for Web 2, it was paid media. For Web 3, it's digital property rights and ownership. And so Parachute is right now a consultancy. and basically helping brands and agencies learn about the space and understand it. But once that sort of learning kind of that baseline of education is there, then it really kind of, we all together kind of move into this next phase where we want to build and we want to do stuff. And so really thinking about Parachute offering a suite of products and services that brands or agencies can use to deploy their Web3 strategies.
I appreciate that you can slow things down for people like me too to kind of talk about this. You mentioned consumer behavior. I've heard some people describe this kind of NFT as a fun tech trend, but others, they say it's the future of finance. Where are you kind of on this stream? Where do you think this is going to be? If you've got to go 10 years down the road, and we're looking back at NFTs today, what's that journey been like? Where are we going?
NFTs are the future of everything.
That's a bold statement.
So the way to think about it right now is we're uncovering tiny little use cases along the NFT journey as the whole ecosystem, both from a tech standpoint and from just an adoption, like a consumer adoption standpoint, as people are comfortable with using the new tech, right? And so right now, the use cases are like pretty simple, and they're mostly around digital collectibles. But separate digital collectible from digital ownership, digital property rights. And when you do that and you kind of think about the internet, an internet that's owned by the users.
That's a great way to put it.
Right? Infrastructure that's owned by the participants, that's what it enables. Then you start to look at you look at the internet totally differently.
Wow. It's when I hear people like Gary Vee talk about, NFTs are kind of like an online garage. Gary Vee. Thank you, because that would have been awkward. Of like, well, now I have to pause the video, and I gotta show you who Gary Vee is. He's described it as like an online flea market, garage sale, like going on and finding these things, and I don't think he summarized it that way. I think he just meant more that's the space he likes to play in, to find collectibles. And you've kind of taken this other route of property ownership. So when we see brands jumping on this trend, we've seen everyone from Charmin toilet paper and Taco Bell and the NBA, NFL. So many brands this year have jumped in and done something. I also have a secondary question around the word jump and parachute, but we'll get to that. Yeah. I think I'm picking up on some things here of what you're building. Man, is this a trend for them, these big brands that are jumping in? Are they just getting their feet wet to try to do more? Are they experimenting? What's your takeaway on that?
So the same way that all content moved online, I think it's pretty safe to say all media and all content moved online. All ownership, forms of ownership, will move on-chain. That's what we're kind of talking about, like the internet as this thing that everybody can own, but we're also talking about the ownership of your house moving on-chain, meaning a future house transaction can be as simple as us two and our Apple Watch or phone say, I want to buy your house, and we just swap the NFT. And the NFT represents the ownership of that physical asset. And so it can be the asset of, it can be a digital asset, but it can be a car, it can be a house, it can be a painting. And so you just have to, there's just the tech that's kind of being worked through and built out to make those connections and make that, the UX, the consumer layer, really friendly so that you and I can just do that kind of swap.
Huh. This is probably a great time to talk about Dot's Hop House, the sponsor for today, where we've set up. If you'd like to pay them through Watch or any sort of payment, I would appreciate that. So that's really interesting, man. So everything kind of ownership-wise, taking this digital space. I think a lot of our older crowd would think, man, there's security issues. I'm assuming your take would be it actually is more secure because it's there.
It's more secure. Yeah.
So that's really the blockchain portion of that. Yeah. Okay, so that makes sense. When I hear about social tokens and cryptocurrency and these things that are constantly moving, there's this evolution online. of putting them in a secure place where the vast majority of humans can't touch them. They can't get to these places. Fascinating. You would have think I would have done a little bit more research before we sat down and talked. If I asked you what fungible means,
Yeah.
Let's do that, because I didn't want to make you look bad. Yeah. It was like, no one knows. But what?
We'll just cut it out.
Fungible was cool. I got a lot of Funyuns when I tried to Google that. What do we got going with fungible?
Right. So you've got non-fungible and then fungible. Fungible. If I had a basket of pennies, right? All the pennies are the same. They're fungible. You can interchange them. Right. I don't care which penny I have. It's the same. So it's just it's a wash. You just but then you look at a deck of cards. Well, no, that's not a good example. Let's say a basket of snowflakes.
Okay.
Because every snowflake is unique. So it's non-fungible. You can't just take one snowflake and change it for another, because you're not getting the same snowflake back. You're getting a different snowflake. It's non-fungible.
That makes complete sense.
Yeah.
90s sitcoms where the kid loses the dog and they just buy any dog to replace it.
Yeah,
that's
not really fungible.
That's not a fungible replacement.
Really
Good to know.
Yeah.
So, man, what does someone like me do? If you're talking to a brand manager, if you're talking to someone either on the client side or agency side, how do we jump in? How do we start dabbling in this space so that we're not left behind? We want to make sure that people like me that are already behind, how are we going to catch up so we're ahead of the others?
So I would argue that just the fact that we're having this conversation, you're so far ahead of where 99% of marketers are.
Hear that, LinkedIn? I'm that far ahead.
So let's put it this way. We are, if we compared it to the start of the internet, 1994 was kind of when the internet kind of got mainstream awareness. Not mainstream adoption, but kind of, there's a video, Today Show video of Katie Couric and Brian Gumbel just fumbling over, like, what is a .com? What is the internet? What does an @ symbol mean? Email? What do you write to it? Like, just not even understanding. And so then we went on this pretty much this 25-year building phase from 94 to 2000, right? We're at 94 for Web3. So we have just, the next 10 years are going to be certainly important, but even the next 10 years after that is just going to be amazing to see what's built. So if you're talking about it and you're getting into it now, you're at the beginning, and that's a perfect place to be. So how do brand marketers, people in advertising, people in the marketing function get into this space? So last year I put together a trends presentation, literally just for myself, because I'm a nerd and I like to make decks. And then I got on the phone. We're sitting at home during the pandemic, not doing anything. And I'm like, I'm just going to call up smart people that I know, and I'm just going to present this trends presentation to them.
Love that.
Super. Yes.
I wasn't on the list to get the presentation, but I don't blame him for that.
So the summary of those presentations was, everyone was like, this is real. This is something. I've never heard of it, but I buy the argument that there's a big thing coming and that we need to pay attention to it. I have no idea where to start. That was the sentiment. And that sentiment was even as high as like a CEO for $1 billion company. Same sentiment. You're onto something. The space is growing. It's going to be important. Him in particular said that the whole thing was too early to do anything. I argue that it's not too early.
Joke's on you, guy.
Joke's on you.
Here we are. You're not here. No one called you.
So, but his comment was super insightful, and it helped me a ton. So that comment of it's too early to build made me think, well, is it too early to learn? And it's like, I don't think so. Like, you got to start somewhere. And what if we could all learn together? And then when it really starts to feel right to build stuff, let's build. And so that led to the idea of, well, why isn't there an industry association for Web3 for advertising, for agencies and brands. In the 90s, we had the IAB, the Internet Advertising Bureau, right? When social media started, there was all sort of social media clubs. With the birth of mobile, we had the Mobile Marketing Association. So why isn't there an industry association for Web3?
Makes complete sense.
Right? And then taking that a step further, what's the best way to learn if we're all just trying to learn? Well, let's jump in and do stuff. So let's design this industry association using Web3 fundamentals, right? Using tokens, using NFTs to organize the community, to build the community. So if you were in the 90s and you were trying to learn about the internet, you wouldn't pick up the phone and have an industry association where you just talked about the internet. You would build websites, and you would probably have a newsletter, and your industry association would probably have a blog, and you would use those tools, and you would just use them to learn. And so that's what Jump is. So Parachute is sort of it's a company with clients, and then Jump is your Web3 industry association. So jump into Web3.
But essentially the parallel I'm seeing between the two is you're building online communities, man. You're building, and I've seen that online, and everything you're talking about, that makes complete sense. Even when I reached out to Jeff to say, hey, I'd love to sit down and do this and talk with you, we talked about doing this on Zoom. Jeff's sentiment, I think, is not another Zoom, not another online meeting. This is the first time I've even sat with a human. I don't know if I can touch him in a public place, but here we are, maskless, coming out of kind of emerging and starting a new year in a new way. Really cool to kind of get in this mentality of community space of learning. So how do people find you? No one wants to find me. How can they find you? How can they reach out to you and learn more from you?
So the email address is jeff@parachute.xyz. And then Twitter @Jeff Kauffman Jr. Those are two places to reach out. And then Jump is joinjump.community. And so Jump is in a request invite phase, and we're getting very close to actually issuing our founding member NFT, which essentially is an on-chain badge, right? It's kind of building your on-chain resume of being a part of the creation of this organization. And then once we issue that NFT to the members, we will then also distribute Jump social tokens to these members.
I'll sign up for it. My notes say do that. I need to do that. That makes complete sense.
Essentially, that's an on-chain community. And then the next step from there is, we all kind of build and we all kind of experiment. And then from there, I think people will start to generate their own ideas naturally and how they can apply it to their agencies and their brands, and start building, on-chain communities for brands.
Man, I love what you're doing. This is awesome. Thank you for sitting down with us, letting me annoy you for a few minutes today and answer questions. I love what you're building. I look forward to seeing it, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for the time.
Absolutely.